Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. Here for E3 Saxo Bank Classic, also formerly known as E3 Price, E3 Harelbeke, 205k. So it's about an hour shorter than Flanders, but it's a very similar race. Loads of cobbled climbs. It really kicks off with the La Houppe 2Ks, 5.1%, and there's the Quarterkier, Tyenberg. They're all between 600 meters and 1300 meters, between 4 and about 9%, the steepest of which is the Paterberg, which comes with about 40 Ks to go. The run into the finish is flat, like Flanders. So it's called a dress rehearsal. Asgreen for Quick Step. No Alaphilippe this year, no Tim de Klerk. He has Ballerini, Stibar, Seneschal, no Lampard either. Jumbo stack squad with Wout, Laporte, Teish, Benoit, Ineos, no Pidcock, Van Baal and Narvaez, their leaders. So still teams decimated by injuries. But we had more injuries and crashes before the race even kicked off.
Yeah, unfortunately, Lawson Craddock fell off the podium, basically. And next to that, just after the start of the race, there was another crash, I think 3 kilometers into the race, where we saw that Tosh van der Sande of Jumbo was in that crash and Stefan Küng. Van der Sande actually ended up giving up, and the team manager in the car of Jumbo said something along the lines of, "It looks like it's an elbow fracture, so let's hope it's not the case. Otherwise, the entirety of his preseason is ending, I'm afraid." When it comes to the rest of the race, it looked like it was hard for a breakaway to form based on the reports we had. We only started getting visuals the second we got over La Houppe, like you mentioned, to trigger towards those climbs. And we knew the Kortekeer and the Tyenberg would be coming up pretty damn soon. So I was expecting a sprint towards the Tyenberg like last year, where Quickstep tried to pull that off in some shape or form, and it worked out for them last year. And we saw multiple teams try and do that. We got towards the Kortekeer with 3 teams trying to move towards the front, Quickstep, Trek, and Jumbo. And I was scared. I was really nervous because I thought somebody would crash. And fortunately, nobody did. And I think that every team was kind of not completely happy with the situation before we got to the Tyenberg lead up towards it, because we had like 3 riders of that team at the front, 3 riders of that team, and then a few spots behind there was another 3 riders. But I think a team was trying to get their full team at the front. And we got towards the Kortekeer, as always, typical situation on there. The tempo just stocks, and we've got to move. A meme attack by Dries de Bond in pure Quinn Simmons style, like last year. Like, where do you see the point in an attack like that at that moment?
Maybe he thinks he's going to get dropped on Tyenberg, and if he can gain 15 seconds, that's the only logical rationale for it. Otherwise, yeah, it's pointless. No one reacted to it. And I remember last year, Quickstep going past Simmons on the top base of the Tyenberg. But yeah, Jumbo pretty much did the same thing. Let it out. Not as hard into the base as Quickstep did last year. Quickstep literally did a full sprint lead out with Ballerini, de Klerk, and co into the base. Jumbo didn't have as many riders. It was just Van Hooijdonk controlling. And so they had them all lined up. Asgren's got no one around him so they go over the Kortekeer. They base of Tyenberg, like 75 Ks plus to go, and Wout van Aert launches with Laporte. I think maybe Benoit in his wheel as well. Asgren deep, that would be a feature of the day. And they create a pretty small selection straight away. So super aggressive from Jumbo, and we never really saw Asgreen able to lean on his teammates again. But he was strong. He bridged it back. Who was the group? It was a tricky group for Jumbo over the top of the Tyenberg. We had
Van Aert, Benoit, Laporte, Mohoric, Stuyven, Küng, and Asgreen. So that's basically 3 riders of Jumbo at that point, with 4 riders that are considered leaders of other teams in their group right there. And we know that the breakaway was still ahead at that point with a few riders that were not necessarily part of the teams of the riders that were chasing that down. And the curious question then is, what does Jumbo do in that situation? They get over the Tyenberg with 3 riders in a group of 7, a bit of a gap on the other people behind, and that gap kept expanding slowly but surely. Are they going to keep on pacing? Can they land? Can they have someone else in the group pacing that is not their team? And what do you think about that situation?
It's tough. Like, they got more cooperation than I actually expected. I thought it was going to come back very, very quickly because why would Sturven pull? He didn't.
Yeah,
Why would Askren pull? He actually did quite a lot. Way more than I expected. Maybe he was worried that Jumbo would counter or go clear. Kung was pulling because he always does. Mohoric was contributing. So it was all looking pretty good for a time. Gap went out to 30 seconds before Ineos started pacing with Rowe coming back, pacing with Ben Turner, aka the clock Big Ben. And yeah, it was tricky for Jumbo. Before we get into the next phase of the race, mention our title sponsor, Zwift. I was watching at a big day, Benji. Big mountain hike, came back E3 onto Zwift for Tour of Watopia stage 5, the final stage. Really enjoyed. Actually, people saw me in chat. I think a lot of people were watching E3 on their Friday afternoon on Zwift at the same time. If you want to check out Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun, you can go to Zwift.com and get a free 7-day trial through the link in the description down below. Thanks, as always, to Zwift for supporting and being the title sponsor of the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. Jumbo occasionally would send Benoit up the road, not
yeah,
really Laporte. Occasionally, if people were mucking about, they'd be like, okay, Benoit, pull, or like go clear, and he'd get marked by Girmay. Girmay was so reactive to all moves today. But they didn't really use Laporte,
yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, Girmay was one of the riders that bridged up on the Eikenberg after Ineos exploded the race there behind, and I think Narvaez was also able to bridge up and so forth. So the group was a bit bigger by that time. Benoit indeed kept attacking and so forth, and I think that Benoit then realized that, well, that breakaway that held on earlier, I got to make some moves here as well. And we saw breakaway riders of the initial breakaway even drop at that point and try to lower the amount of people in the group to perhaps make sure that they cooperate more. But the situation has changed so much on that situation where Narvaez and so on comes back that also Jumbo riders kept coming back. I think Turnison was able to bridge back to that group. And also Quickstep riders. I think Seneschal was one of the riders that also bridged up Ballerini, but he didn't hold on for too much longer after that, I think. What did you expect from that point onwards towards the upcoming Paterberg or the Quarmont combo?
I thought Jumbo were going to send Turnison to the front to keep it together and try and get multiple riders over the Paterberg. Actually, around the Stationsberg area, I thought Wout was making a few little mistakes where just at the end of climbs, he was doing that thing where he just starts pulling again on the flat with Asger in the wheel. Not a full-blown attack, but
Yeah.
like surging out of corners. He's got Asger in the wheel, and it was putting Mike and maybe Van Hooijdonk under pressure behind. He eventually stopped that, and we knew we were going into the base of the Paterberg with the Gruppo Intacto. I don't know what the Flemish version of that is. Compacto Gruppo, a peloton, I think. So Jumbo did the lead out into the base of the Paterberg. Asger and Benji, the opposite to last year. He had to fight into the
Yeah.
base of the Paterberg, fighting for position, and he's not entering it on Wout's wheel. So
Yeah,
I
it
think that
was.
was the pivotal moment.
I agree, but I think it was intriguing because a good 200 meters before the Paterberg, he looked into the worst position ever. And at that point, he like switched through to two riders. I was able to position himself in fourth place, but then another Jumbo rider took the corner wider, causing him to have to like go slower at the foot of the Paterberg than the two Jumbo riders at the front, which was Wout van Aert and Laporte. And then it became very clear that there were two stronger riders at that point, and Asgreen had to come from further on the Paterberg. And we saw that Wout van Aert was the one doing the hammering. Laporte was able to follow. Benoit was dropping through the group. And what's happening with Asgreen?
He's caught behind Girmay. Girmay lost the wheel. He'd been following a lot of attacks earlier, and I think it cost him a little bit, but still great ride from him. And yeah, Wout was gone clear. He had a 5-meter gap on Laporte, and this was like Paris Stage 1 all over again, just minus Roglic. Two Jumbo riders go clear over the Paterberg with Wout, I think, looking behind, just over the top, seeing Laporte a bit off his wheel and waiting up, and then those two were working. And they already had a good gap over the top of like 10 seconds. And I think Seneschal had a mechanical. I I think he would have not been any use on the Paterberg anyway. I don't think that mechanical changed the race really in any big way. And immediately I was like, this is with 45 Ks to go in the race at the top of the Paterberg. Immediately I was like, the race is over. Because Asgren's been worked a little bit before the Paterberg. He's already not looking as strong on the cobble climbs anyway. The group is going to lean on him to chase on the flat tarmac sections. He's going to want to conserve a little bit, and he did pull for a while. All the other teams with 2 riders, Madouas and Kung for FDJ, Van Baal and Narvaez for Ineos, they just went full gas, maximum 1 minute effort, and still got dropped. So they're not going to help. And then you have 2 guys clear, both strong as hell, pulling at threshold. So it's just never coming back, ever.
Yeah, certainly. And we saw that when you see that group and one rider goes to the front, I don't know which specific rider it was, and then the second rider kind of sits in his wheel at the moment that he should be relaying, taking over, well, then you know that if one rider does that, another will do it eventually, and then another rider will do it, and then attacks start coming left and right, and then the group doesn't work together anymore too well. And yes, Asgren, Kung, and Madua were still riding quite a bit. Madua even attacked on the outer Quadramon towards the end quite a bit. But in all honesty, it was looking like those 2 riders were in the clear at that point, and that the race would be won by one of those 2 riders.
Yeah, it was insane. Having 2 riders go clear with 45 Ks to go after lighting it up with 75 on the Timeberg, with just destroying the field. And yeah, I think eventually the group behind you just see them rolling in rotation. The gap goes to a minute 30, a minute 40, a minute 50, a minute 50 with like 15 Ks to go. And now the question was, what would Jumbo do in the sprint? In the end, cut to the chase. They roll across the line, this time with no Primoz. So they actually do the finish photo. Remember at Paris, Roglic like veered across to the left and he nearly crashed on the finish line. They make that right and roll across the line. And I couldn't tell who'd won. And I'm not sure what the plan was. In the end, Wout van Aert wins. He didn't gift it to Laporte. Same time as Laporte with Kung taking 3rd on a minute 35. He attacked the group really, really late, and it finally worked. Good to see him get 3rd. Girmay 4th, Moritz, Madouas, Narvaez, Benoit, Van Baal, Asgren 10th, and Sturven actually got dropped from that group. So bad day for Trek. Pedersen gone by Tyenberg, and Sturven dropped from G2. My question is, Benji, Jumbo-Visma, Wout van Aert gifted Laporte stage 1 of Paris-Nice. Should he have gifted it? Should they have sprinted? What should they have done? And why?
Well, I don't think they should have sprinted against each other because that would be weird. Even though it would be funny for us as the viewers, we'd enjoy that. But you say Paris, let's talk about it. They go to the line with 3 riders. Roglic didn't need it because he was going for GC. We have Wout van Aert in that situation. Laporte was the one to gift that in his French home country. That's a perfect way to get his domestique work for life for that team. So they gifted that there. That's understandable, gifting it to Laporte there. That's the way to go in that race. But then we come to E3. It's a Belgian race. I think a Belgian winner has not won here in the Belgian National Championship jersey since 1960 somewhere. So that's a pretty cool stat to win. And I don't think they were thinking about that. But let's say that they decide to gift it to Laporte. How much of the Belgian population will be annoyed by the fact that Laporte stole the victory of Wout van Aert today?
I think that would have been the narrative, yeah, because Wout could have dropped him and Wout waited for him on the climbs. Like, Wout was way stronger on the climbs, and in that sense, it wouldn't really make sense to gift it to Laporte. Like, Wout created the split on Tyenberg. Wout created the split on Paterberg. Wout was pulling full gas in between the climbs. That being said, I would have liked to have seen them sprint for it. Just to let's know what Wout's sprint would have been like before Tour of Flanders. Let's get some data on what Wout's sprint would have been like before the big dance. And I think that would have been more sponsor exposure. Don't you think that would have blown up on social media? That
Well,
we never see it. We never see that. And now it's just like, oh, nice, they cross the line together, domination. Yeah, it's big event. But
nah,
that could go mega viral.
yeah, that's true. But what I would have done is I would have had Laporte drop Wout on purpose on the Tichemberg, just fake dropping, just to like get everybody on social media tuned up, and then later he just scrolls back to Laporte and they just ride over the line together again in the same way, just to like make that hype a bit more. But we're now talking about different narratives here. In the end, Wout van Aert was getting that victory. I honestly think it's the good decision to give it to Wout in this situation, partially for that narrative we just spoke about with the Belgians being happy about it. I would have found it funny, but the rest of the Belgians would not have. And next to that, it's also the fact that I think you want to give him some confidence and make sure he's got some results on the plateau already. He has never won E3 before, so I think he wants to tick them off on his palmarès as well, Wout van Aert.
Okay, that's a nice decision to have for Jumbo, although it sounds like pretty obvious, really. I'm being silly, like it should go to Wout. More difficult decisions, worse situations. How did Betty say it? Vara's Quickstep, huh? Where are Quickstep? What's going on with Quickstep? This is like, if you watched these two races side by side, 2021 versus 2022, is that the year we're in?
Yeah.
It's like night and day, the difference between Asgreen in group with multiple riders, 4 riders in a group of 9. Here is solo closing with 4 Jumbo riders with 80 Ks to go. I know it is difficult to be overly critical of teams at the moment. I've actually been holding back a little bit because there's so much sickness, so many injuries. Is that the explanation for this, Benji? Or what? Because why are they such a different team to last year?
I think that we can even go more extreme in saying that Quickstep today was the Jumbo Visma of last year, a solo leader having to do everything himself in a race. And Jumbo today was Quickstep of last year, even when it comes to the attack on the Timeberg and so forth. Just very similar behavior in that sense, being in the front group with multiple riders, outnumbering the others. And there's a quick, like, it's clear that it just switched around between this year and last year. Now, why is that? I'd argue it's mixed. I think that Jumbo Visma has strengthened their team clearly with Tish Benoit and Laporte. Like, without those two, who is still with Wout van Aert after the Timeberg? And then you've got an issue. Nathan van Hooydonk, perhaps, I'd argue. Mike Turnitsen's positioning is a bit of an issue, I'd argue, before climb, so I don't think he would have been there. And then we look at the fact that Quickstep, like you said, has had to struggle with a lot of illnesses. Like other teams, I'd argue that Jumbo has had somewhat the least of those from all the teams.
Definitely.
And Quickstep with Lampard being ill a few times and now not being at the start line as a consequence. We know that Ballerini wasn't looking too good for a while. We know that Leclerc, also an issue there, that he was off the bike now for the entirety due to that heart issue. And the fact that the likes of Steimler is tuning up and Stijn Steels, those riders, Honoré, who didn't start today, for example, like that's 6 riders to start with instead of like 7. And to be honest, Steimler and Steels are not going to be the riders that do it here at E3 for a Quickstep. No offense to those riders, they're good riders, but not to be in the final of these races. So who do you have left? Seneschal, Stibar, Asgreen, and Ballerini, who hasn't been looking that great this year. So Stibar, it's one or the other for him in few races, and it doesn't seem like today he was anywhere. And Seneschal was looking decent, but I feel like he's that kind of cobble rider that is better suited for Roubaix than he is for the Hill Classics. Am I wrong in that?
Well, I mean, last year he was like second wheel going into Tynberg, attacking with Asgreen. But the difference is, and this is probably a flow-on effect from No de Klerk, they're entering the Tynberg in bad position, so then there's no slip room. So, when Seneschal enters in the front, Asgreen attacks over the top of him. Seneschal can do the climb 2 seconds slower and still crest the climb with the group of 9. Whereas Wout was the opposite last year. He starts 10 wheels back. He has to do the whole climb 2 seconds faster than Seneschal and Asgreen. And so maybe that's a de Klerk issue. Without him there, they're not able to control, not able to be in the base of climbs well, and Steimler just can't do that job the same way.
Yeah. I think that I've got a potential solution for next year. Obviously, the illness is just something that needs to be fixed automatically. You can't just like expect that to be fixed. But I think when it comes to transfers, there are options on the market. Jumbo did great when it comes to Laporte and Benoit, but what if Quickstep signs Anthony Turgui next year? He's out of contract. Why not?
Maybe Campenarts. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who's out of contract, but they do need to. Stibar's aging out. They need to stock up on some classics guys. It also must be said, we haven't mentioned who I think was the biggest X factor in the Cobble Classics for them last
Alaphilippe?
year. Alaphilippe. He's the world champion. He's not doing the Cobble Classics this year because he's wanting to focus on Liège, winning that finally, and Tour of Flanders. He's one of two with Asgreen in a group of four or five in the finale. He's attacking in Omloop and then leading out the sprint. I'm not sure if he did E3 or not. They're missing him because he's one of their best riders. So Asgreen solo, I don't know how strong he was today. Pretty strong, but it's a whole different ball game when they can't ride the Quick-Step way. Like with no sprinter, with like Asgreen, he beat MVP in a sprint, but you know what I mean. They're looking like a different team. Do you expect this to turn around by Flanders? It's in a week, and it's in like 9 days.
I don't expect Quickstep to turn around in that way, but I do think that the addition of other favorites into the race in the Tour of Flanders, like a Van der Poel riding that race, like a Pogacar riding that race, who I consider with one of the outsiders of that race, certainly, then I'd argue that Jumbo will have a much harder time, which will allow opportunities for riders like Asgreen to benefit from that. So I think it's more because Jumbo will have a harder time winning RVV in the same way that they did today. And as a consequence, the outsiders can benefit from that. Does that make sense?
Definitely. You think, MVDP's there in the group on the Tyenberg today. It's just another man to cover Benoit when he slips off the front, or to pull, or to help Asgreen, or to Mark Van Aert. Maybe Van der Poel doesn't lose Laporte's wheel, and then that brings the group back together. Maybe he snap closes it over the top of the Paardenberg, and that helps Asgreen. All these sort of things, like MVDP not being here and not being at Omloop, it certainly makes life a lot easier for Jumbo-Visma. And yeah, but otherwise, I want to talk about MVDP just quickly. We have Gent-Wevelgem on the weekend. I think it's on Sunday from Ypres to Wevelgem. And Van Aert's lining up at that as well, apparently. He won this last year in a 10-man sprint ahead of a lot of other sprinters, solo second. Jakobsen's there, Ballerini, Pedersen, who had a shocker today for Trek. Do you think it's going to be a similar race last year? I think it's going to be a sprint. When I look at who's been brought from all the teams, Quickstep, Jumbo, Bike Exchange, UAE, Trek, all want sprints.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the wind in the Moeren, which is that echelon section before we get to the bergs, the little hills in Gent-Wevelgem. But based on the weather that I've seen in the last week here in Belgium, I don't considering a big possibility that echelons happen. But hey, weather can change by the day, so perhaps it might still change. Perhaps we'll see crazy echelons. I hope so, but I kind of fear that it's going to be more of a sprinty type race. And in all honesty, like, I think Jumbo will have to make that race relatively hard, knowing that they've got pure sprinters on that race. They will need to light up those hills if they want a sprint for their sprinter, you know?
If they go to the finish with a group of 30, with Jakobsen having 3 men, and De Maar and Co. and Groenewegen, that's not good chances or good odds for Wout. So, but then do they want to make the race really, really hard and light it up before Flanders? I don't know. They've brought, it looks like, the sprint team. Maybe they do what they did at Kerner, Benji, and they drop him out and they let Laporte have a chance after they did it at Omloop, but probably not. It is, they'll probably try and crosswinds. That would make the most sense. Campenarts, hopefully he gets a bit more luck today. We forgot to mention he had a mechanical in the bike change, took about 3 minutes before the quarter gear. So that was his race over. Otherwise, Volta Catalunya hasn't finished yet, and it's a sprint stage, so we disrespected it. We'll let you know the results of that when we're doing the Stage 6 recap tomorrow. But in Italy, a race has finished, which we weren't able to watch because there's no television coverage. Mathieu van der Poel won that stage, perhaps knowing Wout was solo ahead of Hayter and Remy Mertz and Dion Smith and Mick van Dijk. It was a hilly race at Settimana Internazionale Coppi e Bartoli. The second last stage, stage 4. You've gleaned what happened from Twitter, Benji. Like, what exactly happened?
Yeah, this comes from Sporza, so credit to them for explaining how the race went, as we don't have live coverage. But there was a descent of a bigger climb at the stage with roughly 70 kilometers to go, and Mathieu van der Poel decided to attack the elite group or peloton at that point, bridging towards a breakaway, and was in that breakaway for the majority of the race from that point onwards. And it took until 5 kilometers to go for the peloton to actually catch up to your boy Mathieu van der Poel in the front group. And they went to the sprint. And what happened in that sprint? Well, yeah, Van der Poel still won.
Sounds like Amstel Gold 2019. No, reverse. So he was in the full sang position of Amstel Gold 2019, got caught one sprint anyway. Anyway, Hayter beat him in the sprint the other day. But yeah, hopefully some footage comes through of that. And I don't know, maybe there'll be highlights somewhere. It sounds crazy. It's a shame. It's a really big shame that there's these races with MVDP doing crazy things and we can't really see it. But that's all from us today. E3, let's not get too overexcited. Let's not get too overworked. Would you rather win Tour of Flanders or Omloop, E3, and Gent-Wevelgem combined? I think Quickstep want Flanders, Jumbo want Flanders. It's the Tour de France of one-day races, except that's actually Paris-Roubaix, so that doesn't make sense. So it's a big race, and I think E3 doesn't necessarily mean that Jumbo are going to clean it up. Hopefully they don't, because it'll make for more exciting viewing in the last hour. But that's all from us today. We'll see you at the Catalonia recaps tomorrow. Ciao.